On December 1st, 1948, a man's body was found on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. He was well dressed, but he had no identification. Police found a half-smoked cigarette and some used matches, but nothing else. Who was this man and how did he die? These questions would baffle investigators for decades. The dead man was lying on the sand, propped up against a seawall. His head rested on his chest, his left arm was straight and his right arm was bent. He wore a suit and tie, but the labels were cut out. He had a bus ticket in his pocket, but it was for a trip he never took. The police were immediately stumped. The man had no obvious injuries, and there was no sign of a struggle. They searched his pockets, but they found nothing that could identify him. They fingerprinted him and circulated his description, but no one came forward to claim him. The only clue to his identity was a small piece of paper found in a hidden pocket of his trousers. It read "Tamam shud," which means it is finished in Persian. Weeks later, police found a suitcase at the Adelaide train station. The suitcase had been checked there on the day before the Somerton man's death. Inside, they found more of the man's belongings, including clothing, a razor, and a stencil brush. They also found a book of Persian poetry with a page torn out. Could this book be connected to the Tamam shud note? The suitcase contained a wealth of items, but none of them provided any real clues about the man's identity. The clothes were all well-made and expensive, suggesting that the man came from a wealthy background. However, all of the labels had been removed from the clothing, making it impossible to trace their origin. The police began to suspect that the man's death was no accident. The police were baffled. Who was this man, and why was he carrying around a book of Persian poetry with a page torn out? They sent the book to experts at the University of Adelaide, but no one could identify the poem or the person who had torn out the page. The case of the Somerton Man was quickly becoming one of the most baffling mysteries in Australian history. Among the items found in the Somerton Man's suitcase was a piece of paper with a series of letters printed on it. Some people believed that these letters might be a code. If they could crack the code, maybe they could finally solve the mystery of the Somerton Man's identity. Over the years, many people have tried to decipher the code, but no one has been successful. Some people believe that the code is a message from a foreign government. Others believe that it is a personal message from the Somerton Man to his loved ones. However, without a Rosetta Stone to help them, code breakers are no closer to understanding the message. The Somerton Man's case went cold. The police followed hundreds of leads, but none of them panned out. The case was featured on radio and television, and it was the subject of countless newspaper articles. Despite their best efforts, the police were no closer to identifying the Somerton Man or determining the cause of his death. For decades, the Somerton Man's identity remained a mystery, but in the 21st century, new technology emerged that gave investigators a new tool to solve old crimes: DNA analysis. Could this be the key to unlocking the secrets of the Somerton Man's past? In 2019, Professor Derek Abbott, a researcher at the University of Adelaide, began working on the case. He partnered with Colleen Fitzpatrick, a renowned forensic genealogist from the United States. They hoped to extract DNA from the Somerton Man's remains and use it to build a family tree. Finding the Somerton Man's relatives was the key to uncovering his true identity. The team of investigators obtained permission to exhume the Somerton Man's body and collect DNA samples. Extracting viable DNA from such an old sample was a long shot, but Abbott and Fitzpatrick were determined to try. If they were successful, they might finally be able to put a name to the face that had haunted investigators for decades. Section 5. A name from the past. After months of painstaking work, the DNA analysis yielded a breakthrough. Professor Abbott and Colleen Fitzpatrick had successfully extracted a DNA profile for the Somerton Man. They uploaded the profile to GEDmatch, a public DNA database, and waited to see if they got any hits. To their amazement, they received a strong match almost immediately. The DNA indicated that the Somerton Man was related to a woman named Joan Webb. Joan had uploaded her DNA profile to GEDmatch years earlier, hoping to learn more about her family history. She had no idea that her DNA would help solve one of Australia's most enduring mysteries. Using traditional genealogy research, Abbott and Fitzpatrick were able to trace Joan Webb's family tree back several generations. They discovered that Joan had a distant cousin named Carl Charles Webb, who had disappeared from his home in Melbourne in 1947. Could this be the Somerton Man? Section 6. Who was Carl Webb? Carl Webb was born in 1905 in Footscray, a suburb of Melbourne. He was an electrical engineer and instrument maker. He was married to a woman named Dorothy Robertson, but the couple had separated before Carl's disappearance. According to his family, Carl enjoyed poetry and horse racing, two details that seemed to align with the clues found with the Somerton Man. The investigators dug deeper into Carl Webb's life, looking for any connection to Adelaide or anything that could explain his presence on Somerton Beach. They learned that Carl had a brother who lived in Adelaide, but that there was no record of Carl ever visiting him. They also discovered that Carl was a skilled amateur boxer, which could explain his muscular physique. Despite this new information about Carl Webb's life, many questions remained unanswered. What was he doing in Adelaide? Why were the labels cut out of his clothes? And what was the meaning of the Tamamshud note and the coded message found among his belongings? Section 7. The Somerton Man's Last Journey. While the DNA evidence strongly suggested that Carl Webb was indeed the Somerton Man, investigators needed more evidence to confirm his identity. They decided to track Carl's movements in the days leading up to his death. If they could piece together his final journey, perhaps they could learn what happened to him. Records showed that Carl had purchased a train ticket from Melbourne to Adelaide on November 30th, 1947. He checked into a hotel in Adelaide under the name C. Smith. The next day he was seen at the Adelaide train station, where he checked a suitcase that was later found by police. That afternoon he was found dead on Somerton Beach. What was Carl Webb doing in Adelaide under an assumed name? Some people speculated that he was having an affair and was planning to meet his lover. Others believed that he might have been involved in something illegal or dangerous and was trying to disappear. Section 8. Case closed? Not quite. The identification of Carl Charles Webb as the Somerton Man was a major breakthrough in the case, but it didn't answer all the questions. In fact, it raised even more questions. Why was Carl in Adelaide? Did he travel there alone? And what was the meaning of the mysterious clues found on his body and in his luggage? Investigators are still trying to determine Carl Webb's cause of death. The original autopsy was inconclusive, and the passage of time has made it difficult to determine if he died from poisoning or some other cause. They're also trying to locate Dorothy Robertson, Carl's estranged wife, to see if she can shed any light on his disappearance and death. Despite the best efforts of investigators, some questions about the Somerton Man may never be answered. The Tamamshud note, the coded message, and the missing page from the Book of Persian Poetry continue to fascinate and frustrate investigators. Section 9. The Legacy of the Somerton Man. The Somerton Man case is a reminder that even in the age of DNA technology, some mysteries remain unsolved. The case captured the public's imagination and sparked countless theories and speculation. Even though we may never know the full story, the Somerton Man's case continues to intrigue us. The Somerton Man was a man of mystery, and his story is a reminder that everyone has a story to tell. He was someone's son, perhaps someone's husband. He had hopes and dreams, and his life was cut tragically short. Even though we may never know all the details of his life and death, the Somerton Man will continue to hold a place in our collective imagination.